Hey there, you guys. I want to tell you a little bit today about my personal experience with conflict and how, sort of like a before and after story, what I used to believe about conflict and what would happen because of that, and what's shifted and how things have changed for the better. Um, because conflict can be the source of so much suffering in our relationships. It can be so bad, um, especially for people like you and I who are sensitive. Um, so last week I talked a bit about the first step to to dealing with conflict better, to softening the struggle, right? To making it less of a problem in our lives, and actually being able to then go on and de-escalate and diminish the damage that conflict can cause in our love lives. And that was simply really to change your perspective around it. So to really intellectually get that conflict in and of itself is not a terrible thing. The second step it is the lynch key that changed for me the way that I handled conflict and made it so much easier for me. And that is that I was able to really investigate what I believed about conflict. And then I was able to then change that belief. So I'll talk a little bit more about how you can do that yourself. But first I want to tell you the story of how my belief and bad relationship with conflict came to be, and then how that changed and what happened after I started thinking about conflict differently. So when I was a little girl, my dad had already been through 2 divorces. One of them was with my mom. And he and my stepmother would argue in the kitchen often at night when I was trying to fall asleep upstairs in my bedroom. And I just remember how terrible it felt. I'd actually have to put the pillow over my head to try to muffle the sound, because it felt intense and terrifying inside of me, and just awful. I couldn't fall asleep while that was happening downstairs below me. And my dad they did actually end up getting divorced. And I think somehow I equated henceforth arguing, fighting with the end of love. So to me, that experience led me to feel as though conflict equals the end of the world as I know it, the damaging, the ruining of a loving marriage. Conflict equaled bad change, right? And so I brought that belief and that way of relating to conflict into my romantic relationships as I grew up, as I got older. And so that meant that every time that a conflict arose between me and my man, I would sort of believe that it would mean that he wouldn't love me anymore. That the conflict meant we were on the brink of breaking up. And that just made everything worse, right? It was like more pain on top of the pain. I was like getting upset that I was upset at him. It was just that much more piling on of suffering while we were in these conflicts, which made it impossible for me to be level-headed and kind and resolve the conflict in any way. It just made everything bad. So at a certain point, I can't exactly remember how I got this, but I realized that the conflict itself wasn't so much the problem. It was what I believed about the conflict. And that actually the truth was very different than what that fearful belief was making it seem. And then ultimately, our conflicts and disagreements with my husband actually led me to feeling more accepted and loved and confident in the strength of our love and our relationship. Because what I could then see was that in conflict, obviously we were both showing our less than ideal selves. And yet, after the conflict was over, we still loved and accepted each other deeply. So that actually made me feel even safer, ultimately, and brought us closer and more connected. So actually, conflict sometimes was doing the opposite of what I was worried that it would do, which was tear us apart. It was actually holding us together. It was actually bringing us more strength and deeper love. And once I could see that, things really changed. So now I feel much calmer when we disagree about things. And when things escalate a little bit, I can come back to that calmness much quicker, because I don't believe that it's the end of the world for us. It gives me extra level-headedness. It gives me more of a sense of control over myself and my reactions. And it actually allows me to de-escalate things, because I have my brain, right? I have access to that more rational, wise part of my brain instead of flipping out all over the place. So I can actually take a time out if I need it, so I can calm even further down. And I can also really allow myself to listen better to what he has to say, and actually take that in, and therefore learn and grow and become a kinder, more loving wife, which I really value. And the last thing about this shift that this new relationship with conflict has brought for me is that that tension and discomfort inside of myself, that emotional unsettledness that conflict brings up, lasts much shorter than it ever used to. So it used to last for hours and hours, which you may very well relate to, like just feeling yucky about the whole experience and just processing. For me now, that's so quick. Yeah. So it's just such a more easeful experience with conflict now. And I want that for you. So next week, I'm going to share a couple more tips about how to de-escalate conflict and how to have more ease in your conflicts, so that you can come away from them with solutions and an ability to move forward together, feeling more close, connected, instead of disconnected and resentful. And that's totally possible, and I'm going to give you some more tips next week. But before then, today, I want to ask you to investigate your own old belief or your own current belief about, your personal mythology about what conflict means. So take a little bit of time, maybe write in a journal. I always like that. Or and then share with us in the comments, because that's always useful for everybody who sees the comments, to see other people's stories and understand what other people have thought about conflict as well. So ask yourself, what do you think it means when you're in conflict? What does that fearful part of you think it means when you're in conflict? What does it mean about you? What does it mean about your partner? And what does it mean about your relationship? Get curious about that, like a scientist would. Just kind of investigate what's going on there, and we'll work a little bit more with that next week. But definitely go put it in the comments and do some investigation and share with us. And I love to hear from you, so I'll look for that in the comments over on the blog. And I'll talk to you next week.